So Ishmael and Isaac, if you guys would know, Ishmael, all of Arabs today, majority of Arabs today are descendants of Ishmael. And all of the Israelites are descendants of Isaac. So these two lines, and all of the world major religions, right? The major world religions today, Judaism, Islam, Christianity, all goes back to Abraham. Like all of Muslims, Islam, they all go back to Ishmael as their founder, as their root. And all of Judaism and Christianity, Judeo-Christian, will all go back to Isaac. So God blessed Abram with these two children. So this morning we're going to be looking at a lot of different Bible verses. I think it's too long actually, but we'll see. But we're going to look at the story of Ishmael. How did Ishmael came to be? What is this promise that God has for him? So Ishmael, this story starts with stories of Ishmael, okay? If you would know, before Ishmael came to be, Abraham was already 75 years old when God called him out of southern Iraq today. Abraham was 75 years old, and his wife, Sarah, was about 65 years old. So these are two fairly older people. It says that Sarah was already past menopause. They've been married for a long time, and they couldn't have any children. And God said, come out to this land, and I will give you children, and I will give you blessings. And then here we are. Years after God promised Abraham and Sarah children, and they still don't have any children, and this is what happened next. Now Sarah, Abraham's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abraham, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Abraham agreed to what Sarah said. It's already a problem right here. Right? Sarah came to Abraham and said, Abraham, we can't have children. God promised us children, but we don't have it. Maybe God wants us to have a child through my slave. And Abraham just said, okay. Right? Like Abraham didn't really think through it. He didn't pray about it. He didn't seek God, Lord, is this what you want? And that is very dangerous, for all of us in our lives. We shouldn't jump. We shouldn't skip. We shouldn't try to claim God's promises with our own strength. We shouldn't claim God's promises with our own free will, with our strength, with our own wisdom. Because bad things will happen when we try to do things, when we try to claim God's promises with our own strength. We need to be in prayer with God. We need to be asking Him, is this what you want? Instead of trying to force it our way. And this was a forced way through Sarah's manipulation and Abraham just blindly agreeing to it. So what happened next? So after Abraham had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarah, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. So right now, Abraham's about 85 years old, right? He left when God called him at 75 years old. 10 years later, still no children, even though God promised children. 10 years they've been waiting. So Sarah said, go. Maybe it's through this Egyptian slave, Hagar. He slept with Hagar and she conceived. There was a baby. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. Dun, dun, dun. Like more drama is happening. More drama in the story of our forefathers. The father of all nations. So Hagar now feels like she's entitled. My master, she's been with my master. My master has been with Abraham for so long and never conceived any children, and I conceived right away. God is blessing me. I am better than Sarah. And there's all this drama happening. Then Sarah said to Abraham, you are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Wow. So interesting, right? Like, do men have experienced this? Any men have experienced this in this room? You don't need to raise your hand. But, like a wife made a mistake, but then it's the husband that gets blamed for. But maybe, Abraham knew that, hey, I shouldn't have done this. I should have done better. Even though my wife was maybe emotional or, it was a bad idea, yet I went through with it. So Abraham said, your slave is in your hands, Abraham said. Do with her whatever you think best. Then Sarah mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. So Abraham just like trying to appease his wife and like, hey, like Hagar is, it's under your control. Whatever you want to do with Hagar. And Sarah just was really mistreating her. This mistreatment is like the same word that was used in the Egyptian, when the Israelites were in Egypt and were slaves, they were being mistreated. So Sarah, Hagar was just really being mistreated badly, and she fled from this place. She fled from their master. So the angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. Hagar fled to the desert. And you would see this happening again later on, where flooding in the desert. But it was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. But you see this, there's this mysterious figure called angel of the Lord. This angel of the Lord is a very specific term in the Old Testament. It's not just any type of angel. It's not an angel or an angel, but it's the angel of the Lord. It's a specific title. And every time this appears, it seems that it is God himself who is talking. It's God himself who is appearing to them. So this angel of the Lord is not just any angel, but it's God himself appearing to Hagar. And he said, Hagar, slave of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? And Hagar responds, I'm running away from my mistress Sarai, she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. So God is wanting to bless Ishmael as well. We all know that the promised descendant is Isaac. God wants to bless Isaac. God wants to use Isaac where Jesus Christ eventually came from. But even Ishmael, God has plans for Ishmael and wants to increase the nation of Ishmael and bless Ishmael as well. So what I wanted to show you is that God is not playing favoritism. God is not wanting, just for one nation to rule over the other nation. God has always wanted the whole world to come believe in him. This is not, right now, Israel and Hamas and the Palestinian, it's not really about political. It's always been about God's heart for everyone in the world to come to know Jesus. It's always been about a spiritual warfare. And we need to be praying for everyone to come to know to Christ, because that's the only way they will be saved and to have true peace in their lives. And God has specific plans for Ishmael and his blessings for them. So as we go on and continue, it says, the angel of the Lord said to her, you are now pregnant and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your mercy. The term Ishmael actually means the Lord heard. El means God. Ish means heard. The Lord has heard. So Ishmael is like God has heard Ishmael. So he says this is a prophecy about what kind of man Ishmael will be. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility towards all his brothers. So a very interesting prediction, a prophecy about what kind of man Ishmael is going to be. Like this Ishmael is kind of like a wild donkey, someone who doesn't conform to social norms. So this prophecy that was given 4,000 years ago is ringing true today in our lives and all throughout history. There's always been infighting between these two nations, these two brothers. So yes, 14 years later about this story, so after this, Ishmael goes back, Ishmael and his wife, his mother Hagar, they went back to Abraham. Hagar gave birth. So Hagar gave birth, and Ishmael is about 14 years old at this moment. So when Ishmael was about 14 years old, this was what happened. Abraham, Sarah already gave birth, so Isaac was out, and the child grew and was weaned. So being weaned means that they're out of breastfeeding. So Isaac here was about 2 to 3 years old, and Ishmael was about 14 years old. So that's the kind of age gap that they have. And on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a greater feast. So, Sarah saw the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had born to Abraham was mocking. So fast forward, right? Well, before we go here, I'll show a little bit. So Hagar goes back to Abraham, and they had child Ishmael, and Sarah and Abraham, God continued to show and appear to Sarah and Abraham. and said, Abraham, I'm going to give you a true son, through Sarah, not through this slave woman, Egyptian woman, Hagar, but it's going to be through your wife, Sarah, that I'm going to bless you and have their descendants through you. So just, continue to believe in me, continue to have faith and trust in me. And God eventually provided for Sarah and Abraham their own son, which is Isaac. And then this is the passage that we have today. Isaac is now weaned and he was born. But when he was weaned and born, for some reason, Ishmael was mocking him. Maybe Ishmael was like a very, just a very active young man, a wild donkey. And he was mocking Isaac. We don't know what kind of mocking it was, but he was mocking Isaac. And then Sarah said, and she said to Abraham, get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in the inheritance with my son Isaac. So there's really this animosity between them. And Sarah just doesn't even want to have Ishmael have any inheritance from Abraham. He wants all the inheritance to go to Isaac. So there's always this infighting between them. So next, this matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son, because he loved his son. It came from him, although it's from a slave woman. But God said to him, do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be counted. So the Bible is very clear that the promise, the inheritance, is really through Isaac. Even though Ishmael was the firstborn son, it was not from a legitimate wife. So the true wife, Sarah, he wants to give the inheritance through Isaac. So the promise of the land, the promise of Jesus Christ coming is through the line of Isaac. So I will make the son of the slave into a nation also, because he is your offspring. But he has not forgotten Ishmael. He still will provide for Ishmael and also give him a lot of descendants. Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He sat them on her shoulders and then set her off with the boy. She went on her way, wandered in the desert of Beersheba. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, I cannot watch the boy die. And as she sat there, she began to sob. Just imagine that he's about to die. Like all of the Arabs, all the Arabian people are about to die right here. There would be no Hamas today if Ishmael died right here. Like everything, all this conflict would have been ended if Ishmael died right here. Right? They were in the desert, there was no water, and they're about to perish and die. And Hagar just put him under a bush, so that he won't be able to see him. So even his own mother cannot see Ishmael. He's just under a bush, lying down under there. No one can see him, and it's just all over. And she started crying. And what happens next? God heard the boy crying. Isn't that interesting? It was Hagar that was crying, but God instead heard the boy crying. And the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, what is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there, as he's hiding there. As if no one could see him, I can see him, and I heard him. God is saying, I will provide for Ishmael. Ishmael no one can see him, he is about to die, but yet God still loves him and cares for him. And this is really the heart that we should have for all people. For Arabs, for Palestinians, for Israelites, God wants us to have compassion and love for all these people. God wants us to share the gospel message to all these people. It's not just for a specific people group that will have an advantage, but it's for everyone. God himself wants to provide and protect for these people. So he says there, and then he says, lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation. Then God opened her eyes and saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with the boy as he grew up. God was with Ishmael, providing for this future Arab nation. And he wants this boy to come to know Jesus ultimately. He wants this boy to come to have a relationship with him and to be with him. And he lived in the desert and became an archer. While he was living in the desert of Paran, his mother got a wife from him from Egypt, which is also where she was from. So a lot of it is like Egyptian roots for our Arabs today. And another passage talks about Ishmael, and they said that, and as for Ishmael, I have heard you, I will surely bless him, and I will make him fruitful, and will greatly increase his numbers. He will be the father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation. You know, there's this comparison, right? Isaac was the father of the 12 tribes of Israel, while Ishmael is the father of the 12, rulers. This is like 12 tribes of the Arabs, So this is comparison. They're both great nation, and God wants both of them to come worship him as his people.